Imagine your brain is a browser with 20 tabs of worry open. No matter which one you close, another pops up. Sounds familiar? Neuroscientists now confirm that patterns like this physically carve pathways in your brain, and with consistent practice, you can start building new ones faster than you might expect. In the next couple of minutes, you'll learn Maris Pier's 3 steps: catch the thought, reframe it from your adult perspective, and install the new thought daily, plus a 2-minute AAA reset and key troubleshooting tips. It starts with recognizing the hidden cost of letting those mental tabs keep running. The hidden cost of background worry. You're halfway through reading a text from a friend when your attention flickers. A reminder about an unpaid bill surfaces, followed almost instantly by the memory of something awkward you said in last week's meeting. You replay it with perfect clarity, tone, timing, and even the way you shifted uneasily in your chair. Your phone is still in your hand, but mentally you're elsewhere, hopping between half-finished threads. None are resolved, yet all are quietly active, skimming off your focus and energy. This constant low-level mental noise has become the norm for many. The World Health Organization reported a 25% increase in the global prevalence of anxiety and depression during the first year of the pandemic, and a 2024 American Psychological Association poll found that 43% of US adults feel more anxious than they did a year earlier. That's not just clinical cases. Millions sit in the gray zone of subclinical persistent tension. It's not the intensity of a crisis that wears you down, but the unbroken continuity of it, like a tap left dripping. The brain, for its part, doesn't distinguish much between helpful and unhelpful patterns when it comes to learning. Neuroplasticity, your brain's capacity to adapt, means that whatever gets repeated gets reinforced. This is a gift when we're building useful skills, but it's the same mechanism that can make chronic worry, self-criticism, or constant problem scanning feel automatic. Each repetition strengthens the same mental pathways, making them quicker to activate and harder to ignore. Maris Pier sums it up simply: thought leads to feeling, feeling leads to behavior. Picture it in fast motion. The thought, I'm not ready for this. The feeling, unease or anxiety. The behavior, you decline an opportunity or hold back from speaking. That action then serves as fresh evidence for the original thought, I was right, I was ready, and the loop tightens. With enough cycles, the response becomes reflexive, playing out before you've consciously chosen it. This sequence happens on a micro scale too. You think about that awkward meeting comment, the feeling of embarrassment rises, and then you hold your ideas back in the next meeting. That immediate pause reinforces the better stay quiet narrative. Each run of the loop is like pressing a shortcut key you didn't mean to program, but now triggers without deliberation. The effects aren't just psychological. When your brain repeatedly flags mild threats, whether they're social slights, regrets, or uncertainties, your body adjusts by keeping stress hormones slightly elevated. You might not notice acute anxiety, but you do notice shortened focus, early fatigue, or irritability over minor issues. The system shifts into a background alert mode, and even restful moments lose some of their restorative value. Left unchecked, these loops can spread beyond their original territory. A work-related doubt becomes a tendency to overthink social events. Regret from one interaction primes you to react defensively in wholly different situations. Like roots beneath the surface, the original loop extends into areas you hadn't connected before. Pier's approach stresses that these patterns, while automatic now, are learned, meaning they can be unlearned. The key is identifying and interrupting the loop at the earliest point possible. Interventions made only after strong feelings have kicked in are far harder to sustain. Think back to the mental browser full of tabs. Closing each one without disabling the auto-reopen setting is an endless task. To truly reduce the clutter, you have to find the source tab that launches the rest. In thought terms, that's the moment your first unhelpful idea sparks. Stop that and the chain reaction doesn't get powered up. Reduce its frequency, and over time the neural route becomes less and less dominant. The shift isn't just conceptual. Neuroimaging research shows that changing long-held thought habits produces measurable differences in neural connectivity. You're not instantly paving a 6-lane alternative highway, but each time you choose the new route, you're smoothing it a little more. At first it feels awkward, like cutting through rough ground instead of cruising on a familiar road, but repetition gradually makes the preferred path the easier one. Our environments, however, are built to feed these loops rather than break them. Work messages show up at all hours, news pushes constant agitation, and social media prompts never-ending comparison. Even downtime is peppered with scrolling through fresh inputs for your brain to ruminate over. Without limits, you're keeping the tab creator running non-stop. Breaking the loop doesn't demand clearing your schedule or eliminating every source of stress. It hinges on targeting the opening thought before it drives feeling and behavior down the old track. Once you practice spotting that trigger, the act of interrupting it gets easier. Pier frames this as editing your inner script. You become aware of the lines as they appear, then choose a different continuation. With repetition, the alternative line takes over as the default. So background worry is not just an unavoidable haze. It's the byproduct of predictable mental processes that follow the rules of learning and can be rewritten with consistent practice. Recognizing the moment where the cycle starts gives you a tangible point of influence, and once you notice that point, you're in a position to change where the story goes next. Of course, knowing when and where to intercept the loop is one thing. Choosing what to replace it with is another, especially if your instinct is to force a sudden switch to something upbeat. That's where many well-meaning efforts run into trouble. Why positive thinking alone fails? Many people try to solve unhelpful thinking by deciding they'll only think positive from now on. The intention is good, but when you tell yourself, everything is fine, everything is great, and your mind responds with, no it's not, and here's the evidence, it can feel like you've just started an argument with yourself. The more you insist, the more your mind digs in. This is the flaw in the positive vibes only idea. Bare affirmations often fail because the brain doesn't simply accept new statements on demand. It measures them against the evidence it already has stored. If the new claim contradicts too much of your lived experience, your mind tends to reject it. Imagine declaring, I love my body, right after you've spent the week avoiding mirrors. The words and the mental record don't match. That conflict, known as cognitive dissonance, creates tension. Instead of soothing you, the dissonance can make the original negative thought feel even more credible. Neurologically, every thought sparks a network of neurons to fire. The more often a thought recurs, the more efficient that particular pathway becomes. But these aren't just mechanical activations, they're tagged with emotional weight and connected to related memories. A belief like I'm not good enough at this is rarely just a sentence in your mind. It's tied to dozens of instances your brain believes confirm it, and it's reinforced by the emotional tone that came with them. When you try to overlay a completely opposite idea onto that structure without new supporting experiences, you're not wiping the old memory, you're competing with it. The new thought may register briefly, but the existing emotional imprint is stronger and overrides it. It's like trying to tune into a weaker radio station while a dominant local signal keeps cutting in. This is why unsupported affirmations can feel empty and worse, leave you even more convinced of the old belief's truth. Much self-help advice leans on the just replace negative with positive formula, but it skips over the distance between the two. If your mind has years of reasons to believe point A, it won't leap to point C in one move. What's missing is a process to change not just the words in your head, but the foundation of experiences and associations that give those words weight. Take someone who has long thought, I'm terrible with money. They may be told to start telling themselves, I am wealthy and abundant. But if their current bank balance says otherwise, their brain will discard the idea immediately. The old belief is supported by missed due dates, borrowing, tense money conversations. The new belief has no history. Without a bridge between them, it's just noise. That's where bridge thoughts come in, small, believable steps toward a larger belief. Instead of I am wealthy, the bridge might be, I'm learning how to manage my money more effectively. It doesn't deny current challenges, so the brain doesn't reject it, and it creates a starting point for shifting identity from bad with money to improving. This concept mirrors cognitive behavioral therapy principles, which emphasize incremental cognitive restructuring and building new thought patterns through repeated, manageable steps. Bridge thoughts work because they adjust the claim to something your internal fact checker can accept. You're not flipping to the extreme, you're edging toward it. Your neurons still fire for a new pathway, but now the pattern is anchored in evidence your mind can recognize, even if it's small. That evidence can be a recent action, a different perspective, or a minor behavioral change. Over time, those smaller thoughts develop their own history, making it easier to expand into more ambitious ones. Like training a muscle, beliefs need graduated practice, small, believable steps your mind will accept and rehearse. Just as you wouldn't start running with a marathon, you don't force your thinking from one extreme to its opposite in a single leap. Too much strain creates resistance, and here, resistance means your brain defaulting back to what it already knows. Small changes also feed motivation. You notice progress faster, which makes the change easier to maintain. If your bridge thought is I'm learning to manage my money, actions like checking your account more often or tracking your spending are immediate evidence. This proof starts to loosen the grip of the old belief because it's no longer the only story your brain can tell. Skip the bridge step and there's no structure for the new belief to take hold. The old pathway remains dominant and the rehearsed positive statement stays unconvincing. This is the real reason positive thinking alone fails. The mental wiring still runs to the old circuit, no matter how often you flip the switch in a different direction. Sustainable change happens when you create a new circuit in stages. Maris Pier puts it in simple terms. You can't outshout your inner critic by contradiction alone. Once you've introduced believable replacements and repeated them enough to gather supporting evidence, the critic's material dries up. The interruptions taper because there's nothing left to fuel them. These smaller shifts may look modest, but internally they're significant. A bridge thought that feels only okay today may feel automatic after a few weeks. From there, you can introduce a stronger positive belief without triggering resistance. The bridge lets you operate within a range your mind accepts while steadily expanding that range. By committing to believable upgrades, you replace pushback with cooperation. Each step is like placing a solid board across the space between you and the belief you want to inhabit. Eventually, you're standing on firmer internal ground, and the expanded belief feels true, not forced. And once you've built that bridge, the next step is knowing exactly where to place it, pinpointing the precise moments and phrases that spark the old loop in the first place. That's the point where change stops being abstract and starts becoming something you can act on in real time. Step 1. Catch the story your mind is replaying. Step 1 starts with paying close attention to something you might usually dismiss, the exact story your mind slips into the moment something small goes wrong. You misplace your keys, and instead of "I'll check the table," you hear "you're hopeless." You stumble over a sentence in a meeting and your inner voice lands on "you always ruin things." These aren't one-off reactions. They're recycled lines, ingrained from years of repetition, arriving as quickly and automatically as a reflex. Often, those lines are old. Some echo words you heard in childhood, others sprang up later from charged experiences, moments where shame, fear, or embarrassment fused tightly to a phrase. That pairing means your brain isn't just recalling language, it's replaying an entire package of thought plus feeling. And because it's wired for speed, it doesn't stop to check accuracy. The script runs without your consent. The feeling is part of the code. Maybe it's a knot in your stomach, a rush of heat in your face, or tension in your jaw. The brain treats these physical cues and the words as a single unit, so the mental and bodily response trigger together. Learning to catch the full package, the line and the sensation that comes with it, is what gives you something solid to work with later. This is the same idea behind CBT thought records, where therapists have people write down the exact wording of an automatic thought and note the feelings attached. In both cases, the goal is precision. You're not cataloging because the thought is true, you're documenting so you can see it clearly enough to change it. Therapists know that vague summaries like "I felt bad" aren't as effective as exact transcripts because the brain responds to familiar word patterns. Change the pattern and you begin to weaken its automatic pull. You don't need to turn this into a big journaling project to get started. Right now, in fact, you can test it. Pause for 10 seconds. Think of the last time your mood dipped suddenly today. Maybe someone didn't reply to your message or you made a small mistake at work. Mentally replay that moment and listen for the first exact phrase your mind used. That's the script. If you can, type it into the Notes app on your phone, word for word, without softening it. That's your first entry. Keeping it practical makes it stick. A small note on your phone or a scrap of paper works fine. Every time you catch that inner voice delivering its usual line, record it exactly. Obviously, no one wants you there stays as is, not "I felt excluded." You'll be tempted to make it sound neutral. Don't. The raw version is the one your brain recognizes and obeys, which is why it's the one you'll reframe later. As you log these, patterns will show. You might find the same 2 or 3 phrases cropping up everywhere, before job interviews, during family conversations, while trying something new. The brain prefers efficiency, so once it has a self-criticism that works in one setting, it reuses it in others. These high-frequency scripts are exactly where you'll get the most return from making changes. Don't be surprised if this feels awkward. Many people are startled by how often these phrases run in the background. That discomfort is useful. It signals that you're shifting from autopilot to awareness. Noticing turns the thought from an unquestioned fact into something you can observe. Once you can observe it, you've already created space between you and it. You don't need to hunt through your whole past to do this. Tracing a thought to its origin can help later, but at this stage, it's not required. This step is about awareness happening in the moment. Whether you catch the thought in real time or only realize afterward that it was there 3 times this morning, you're building the same skill. With repetition, the gap between the moment it appears and the moment you notice it gets shorter. Eventually, you'll see it as it starts, which is when you can interrupt it cleanly. You may also see side patterns emerge, a particular person, environment, or time of day that seems to spark certain lines more often. Make a note if you want, but keep your main focus on the words themselves and the sensations that accompany them. Those are the triggers you'll learn to reframe. The reason for zeroing in on phrasing can't be overstated. Automatic thoughts live in neural pathways tuned to specific combinations of words plus their emotional charge. When you later practice inserting a new line, you'll be competing for that same mental real estate. If you've got the wrong address, a vague paraphrase, your replacement won't stick. Some days you'll gather more than others. That's fine. The aim is steady collection rather than volume. On a slow day, you might record only 1 phrase. On a busy or stressful day, you might fill half a screen of notes. Every entry adds another piece to the mapping, and that map is what you'll use in the next steps. Think of it like assembling the script of a play you didn't know you'd been performing. At first, you might only recall a single scene. Over time, you uncover whole acts. Once you have the script in front of you, it's much easier to change the dialogue. And when the lines start to change, the scenes that follow change too. The key takeaway for now: don't rush to replace or argue with the thought. Your first job is to catch it as it is, exact words, accompanying feeling, and get it out of your head and into a record you can come back to. That's the foundation every later change will rest on. When you've gathered enough of these, the temptation will be to start editing them immediately. That's good instinct, but before making changes, there's something just as critical to understand: what sparks these lines in the first place. Without that, all you're doing is swapping out dialogue, while the same cues keep pulling the old script back on stage. Mistake to avoid: treating symptoms, ignoring triggers. It's a bit like hearing a smoke alarm going off, finding the noise unbearable and removing the battery, while the real fire is still burning in the kitchen. The sound stops, so it feels like something has been solved, but the actual danger is still growing. When it comes to changing behaviors, many people make this same mistake without even realizing it. They put all their energy into silencing the alarm instead of addressing what set it off in the first place. Take procrastination. It's tempting to think the problem is, I waste too much time scrolling, or I keep putting off that project. So you set timers, block apps, color code your schedule. For a short burst, you're back in control. Then one strong wave of avoidance hits and all the systems crumble. That crash isn't about a lack of discipline. More often, it's because the behavior was never the core issue. It was a tactic your brain was using to dodge something it didn't want to feel. In recent years, data from mental health programs shows a familiar pattern. Behavior-only approaches have high relapse rates, often within 3 to 6 months. Researchers note that when the emotional or situational trigger is still in place, the brain eventually falls back to the fastest relief it knows. If 2 hours of TikTok has in the past soothed the stress of starting a daunting task, your brain logs that as a workable solution. Remove TikTok and it will improvise, cleaning cupboards, checking email, reorganizing files until the same tension drops. The surface activity changes, but the avoidance loop beneath runs as before. You see the same mechanism in habits linked to food. Someone cuts out sugar because they want to stop overeating. At first the pantry is clean, the cravings seem to fade. Then a stressful week, an argument, or a cascade of small frustrations arrives. With no sugar around, the brain swaps in whatever's available: crisps, bread, high-calorie takeaway. The specific food changes, but the job it's meant to do remains: bring comfort, offer distraction, or take the edge off a high-stress response. Your brain wasn't chasing sugar, it was chasing the state sugar helped create. Remove the favorite tool but leave the need unmet, and it will find another tool. Maris Pier's point is blunt: you have to treat the purpose, not just the habit. A habit is often only the visible tip of something larger. Without addressing the driver beneath it, you can keep chipping away at the surface for years without loosening its grip. Clinicians call this identifying the behavior's asterisk function, what it actually gives you in the moment. That function might be avoiding rejection, blunting fear, mending boredom, or muting the drop that comes after excitement. Until you target that function directly, the brain will keep producing behaviors that serve it. Imagine someone who rarely speaks in meetings. They tell themselves they're quiet or they don't have much to contribute. The visible behavior is silence. If they try to fix it by making themselves speak up once per meeting, they might manage for a time. But if the underlying trigger, fear of public humiliation, never gets worked on, every meeting still carries the same unease. One awkward stumble and the brain declares, this is exactly why speaking is a bad idea, sending them straight back to silence. Without addressing the fear itself, the change stays fragile. Often triggers are less obvious than major events. They can be small, repeated moments that trained your brain years ago. A teacher joking about your wrong answer, a parent's sharp critique in front of others. These can leave behind beliefs like, it's safer not to stand out, or if I make mistakes, I'll lose connection. Decades later, those beliefs still steer behavior, disguised as simple preference or habit. Avoidance doesn't come from laziness. From your brain's perspective, it's efficiency. Cut off discomfort before it grows. If procrastination, overeating, overpreparing, or withdrawing has worked before, it counts as a tool worth keeping. Just stop makes no sense to the system if no viable replacement is available. The shift comes from changing the question. Instead of, how do I make myself stop this? Try, what is this doing for me right now? That curiosity changes the angle. You might realize you avoid a phone call to sidestep possible disappointment. You binge watch late at night to dampen anxiety when the house is quiet. You bury yourself in extra work to avoid sitting with uncertainty about the future. Recognizing the purpose doesn't mean you approve of the habit. It means you finally know what need it's serving so you can address it directly. Here's a quick method you can use the moment you notice a repeating symptom. Step 1, pause and ask, what does this give me right now? Step 2, try one tiny experiment to meet the same need differently. If you snack to calm anxiety, test a 5-minute grounding exercise before you reach for food. If you scroll to avoid starting a task, try setting up your desk or opening the document without engaging with the main work yet. These swaps give your brain an alternative route to the same relief. When you meet the real need, the habit doesn't need to be fought off through sheer force. It starts fading on its own. Someone who learns to ride out moments of anxiety may find their urge to scroll or snack drops without them ever setting rules about it. Because the need is satisfied, the tool that served it loses value. The deeper payoff is resilience. If the old trigger shows up again, which it will, a new, reliable option already exists in your toolkit. That's the difference between suppressing behavior and replacing it with something better. Suppression is fragile, replacement can last. If what you uncover feels complex or goes deep, persistent addiction, long-standing depression or trauma, getting professional help can make the process more effective and safer. A therapist can help identify triggers, map their roots, and guide you toward replacements that work in your specific context. So the real misstep isn't lack of commitment. It's focusing all your willpower on the symptom instead of the cause. The habit you see may only be the delivery system for something bigger. Find out what that is, address it, and you'll stop pulling batteries out of alarms. You'll be dealing with the source directly. And once you know the real reason a habit exists, you have the perfect opening to challenge the old assumptions propping it up, especially the ones that were formed long before you had the perspective you do now. Step 2, reframe with adult perspective. Step 2 is about taking the beliefs you've been carrying and viewing them through your current, adult perspective. Imagine sitting at a desk as the chief decision maker in your own life. In front of you is a stack of contracts you've unconsciously agreed to. You pick one up and see it's messy, illogical, and clearly signed years ago by a child. At the time, that contract seemed fair, even necessary. But you're no longer that child, and yet the terms have been running in the background as if they were still binding. When you're young, you make sense of the world with limited experience. A single moment can lock into place as a defining rule. If a parent or teacher reacted sharply to you, you might have decided, when people are upset, it must be my fault. There was no wider context available then, no insight into the other person's state, no ability to weigh multiple explanations. The conclusion might have been reasonable to a 7-year-old, but it's not one your adult self would sign today. Those conclusions don't simply vanish with age. Without active review, they tend to keep the same emotional pull they had the day they formed. The brain stores them together with the feelings that went with them, and when they resurface, they can trigger a reaction that feels just as immediate as it did years ago. That's why an old embarrassment can still make you flush, or a passing criticism can feel like a direct threat. Your nervous system is following an old guide, unaware that your circumstances and your resources for handling them have changed. Reframing breaks that link. It's not about erasing the past. It's about giving your brain updated information that changes how the old memory fits into your current understanding. It's like amending the clauses in a contract. You acknowledge the same event took place, but revise the meaning so it no longer limits you. Take a belief such as, I failed, therefore I am a failure. If that belief started with a single school assignment you didn't complete on time, it may have sat untouched for years. Your adult reframe might be, I failed at that task because I was still learning. This keeps the fact but removes the sweeping conclusion. Because it feels plausible and accurate, the brain is far more likely to accept it than a forced, I always succeed. Over time, repeating the updated version changes the association. Thoughts of failure stop automatically, dragging your self-worth down with them. It's useful to think of this as editing a stored file. If you never open it, the same version will keep loading. When you do open it, and replace some of the content with an interpretation your current self agrees with, the next time it runs, it will bring up the new data and prompt a different emotional and behavioral response. Where people often get stuck is assuming that the logic of adulthood should override the emotions of the past, simply because they know better now. Rational insight alone rarely shifts a feeling that was learned early. Bringing the memory or belief to mind and pairing it with a credible, adult interpretation helps to change the emotional meaning attached to it. This engages both the thought and the feeling, which is why it's more effective than reasoning alone. Many of these outdated beliefs operate without your full awareness. You might not recall the moment you decided it was unsafe to stand out, yet still feel tension whenever you speak in front of others. You don't need to excavate the original scene to update its influence. You can work directly with the version of the belief that appears now. Here's a quick way to start. Bring the belief or memory briefly to mind. Notice the feeling in your body. Then state one alternative interpretation your adult self finds true, ideally one that adds context the younger you didn't have. Keep it short and believable. For example, I wasn't ignored because I had no value, they were distracted. This small change weakens the old cause and effect chain. Believability matters. If your current experience doesn't support the reframe, the mind will reject it. That's why smaller, credible shifts tend to last longer than bold claims that skip over your lived reality. Instead of "everybody likes me," you might choose "some people appreciate me for who I am." That focus on partial truth makes room for the belief to grow without setting off inner resistance. You can apply this process to other long-standing constructs. The classroom planted, "if I make a mistake, they'll think I'm stupid," becomes, "if I make a mistake, people will see that I'm human." That alone can take the sting out of errors, reducing the urge to avoid situations where you might slip. Each repetition during real moments strengthens the new link, so the body learns to respond with less tension. Sometimes, framing the past differently involves adding missing details. Seeing a memory from your current vantage point might reveal that a parent's lack of attention was tied to their own stress rather than your worth. This doesn't erase the hurt, but it does prevent that moment from serving as lifelong proof of inadequacy. The more often you use reframing in live situations, the faster it integrates. Catch an old belief as it's triggered, perhaps during a project review, and introduce your adult version immediately. "They think I'm useless" becomes, "they're giving input because they want the work to improve." Connecting the updated belief to current evidence helps solidify it. Reframing isn't denial or excusing harmful acts. It's changing the influence of the story in the present, so it no longer dictates your reactions or self-concept by default. You decide what weight to give it now. When you treat reframing as a process of updating outdated agreements, it becomes a practical tool rather than a motivational slogan. You shift from running on rules you didn't consciously set to reviewing and replacing them with ones that work for you today. The more consistently you do this, the more those updated terms shape your choices, replacing the pull of older, less accurate understandings. It's worth knowing that not every reframe will click right away. Some will feel awkward before they feel natural. That doesn't mean they're failing. It means your brain is still getting used to the new version, and some patterns take longer to loosen than others. Troubleshooting when nothing shifts. Sometimes you do all the right things, you've pinpointed an old belief, tried reframing it, even practiced catching it in the moment, and yet the thought still feels as stubborn as ever. This isn't proof that change is impossible. More often, it means you've run into one of the common roadblocks that slow progress if you don't spot them early. 3 of the biggest obstacles fall into simple categories. First is resistance. Part of your mind believes the old belief keeps you safe. Second is impatience, expecting change to happen at the same speed as the decision to start working on it. Third is environment. Your surroundings keep reinforcing the very patterns you're trying to replace. Knowing which one is in play makes it easier to break through. Resistance, the pushback, isn't conscious sabotage. Somewhere along the way, your brain tagged the old pattern as protective. Maybe it kept you cautious or let you avoid situations that felt risky. From today's perspective, it's holding you back, but your nervous system still treats it like a survival tool. That's why when you try to remove it, you might find yourself distracted, mentally blank, or suddenly busy with other things. The practical workaround here is to go smaller than you think you need. Pick one specific, low-intensity thought to work on, not the biggest, most charged one. A small win reassures the brain there's no threat in changing this pathway. Once it stops resisting in that area, you have a model for tackling the harder ones. Impatience is the second trap. We're used to instant turnaround in almost every area of life, so it's tempting to expect the same with internal habits. You do the work for a few days, don't feel drastically different, and conclude it's not working. In reality, new neural pathways form with repetition, and the old ones only weaken after enough time without reinforcement. The shift can be gradual enough that you notice it only in hindsight. A fast way to keep momentum is to shrink the reframe itself. "If I'm useless" to "I'm completely capable" feels like a leap. Cut it down to "I can handle parts of this." That shorter distance is easier for your mind to accept, and each accepted step builds evidence for bigger shifts later. The third block is your environment. Even if you're disciplined about thought work, daily cues can press the rewind button without you knowing. If your workplace punishes mistakes harshly, a belief about never being good enough gets constant validation. If you share space with someone who's self-critical, that style of thinking becomes background noise your own mind adapts to. You won't always be able to change the environment, but you can interrupt its effect. Identify 1 or 2 recurring cues and alter them where possible. That might mean moving where you do certain tasks, taking brief breaks from unavoidable negative input, or surrounding yourself with reminders of the new belief in those contexts. Small tweaks reduce the number of times the old script gets triggered in the first place. If you've adjusted for these 3 factors and progress still feels stuck, look at how much you're trying to change at once. Tackling multiple entrenched beliefs simultaneously splits your attention and makes wins harder to spot. Focus on one repeat offender until you can catch and reframe it with minimal effort before adding another. Visible progress, even in one area, trains your mind to expect success elsewhere. Another overlooked tactic is using physical state to support mental change. Your body's signals to the brain heavily influence what thoughts it accepts. Try pairing your cognitive work with a small physical shift, a quick walk, stretching, or simply changing position before sitting down to reframe a thought. That contrast gives the new belief a distinct sensory context, making it easier for the brain to associate it with a different state. Over repeated practice, those physical pairings become cues that help the new pathway activate more readily. Sometimes a belief lingers because what you've shifted is only the surface version. You may replace "I'm bad at relationships" with something more balanced, but if it was propped up by "people always leave," the deeper assumption keeps feeding related doubts. In these cases, what feels like no movement can actually be progress, peeling away outer layers until the core driver is clear. Each time you reach a new layer, apply the same adult perspective reframe you've been practicing. It's also worth dropping the assumption that feelings prove whether you're making progress. Emotions often update last. The usual sequence is: you notice the thought sooner, you change the wording, you act differently, and only then does the emotional pull start to weaken. If you're still feeling the old reaction but it's no longer dictating your actions, that's progress worth recognizing. Frustration grows when you measure only the end state. Instead, look for smaller indicators: catching a thought you used to miss, resisting an old habit in the moment, or recovering from a trigger more quickly. These are signs that the new pathway is forming even if it hasn't yet taken over completely. Over time, enough of these in progress moments string together into automatic change, sometimes without you noticing until you look back. Not every belief will shift at the same pace. Patterns tied to high emotion memories tend to be more reinforced and will take more repetitions to replace. Lower stakes beliefs might update in days. This discrepancy isn't inconsistency, it's the natural result of how much practice each thought has had. The more a belief has been rehearsed, the more consistent practice it will take to make the alternative the default. If you've made sustained effort, adjusted for resistance, paced yourself realistically, and managed environmental triggers but still see no shift, and if the belief links to intense anxiety, ongoing depression, or is affecting your ability to function, that's when an outside perspective becomes essential. Mental health professionals are trained to spot patterns, uncover deeper layers, and guide you through methods that work more quickly and safely when the burden is high. The World Health Organization and other clinical bodies consistently highlight how common it is for these issues to persist without help, even when people are motivated to change them. Getting support doesn't erase your autonomy, it gives you more tools to use it. Often, the true sticking point isn't that nothing is happening, it's that progress looks different from what you expected. Adjusting your view of what counts as change keeps you from quitting partway through. By approaching the process like this, you're setting up the conditions for the next step, making the updated story in your head the one your mind returns to automatically. That's when the shift stops being something you're doing deliberately and starts becoming the version of events your brain holds on to without effort. Step 3. Install the new thought daily. The next stage is where you stop the old line from creeping back in step 3. Install the new thought daily. Without this part, even the best reframe won't last. You've caught the old script, you've rewritten it, but now you have to make the new version so familiar that your mind reaches for it first. Think about how vividly you can recall an embarrassing moment from years ago, the exact shirt you wore, the sound in the room, someone's expression, yet you barely remember a genuine compliment from last week. The compliment wasn't less real. Your brain just didn't store it as something worth keeping. Events that carry strong emotion tend to get a priority tag. Moments without that surge often get pushed aside. That's why a new belief won't lock in after one pass. You have to give it repeated attention in ways your mind can't overlook. Repetition is the foundation here. An actor wouldn't expect to walk on stage after reading their lines once. You're taking the same approach with your internal script. Each run-through strengthens the neural pathway for that thought a little more. But frequency alone isn't enough. How you practice matters. If an actor runs lines flat, the performance is forgettable. Your brain is much the same. Thoughts rehearsed without any engagement tend to fade, while those tied to feelings settle in more firmly. A simple way to make this stick is to attach the new thought to something you already do every day. If your replacement belief is, "I have the skills to work this out," say it in the bathroom mirror every morning while brushing your teeth. Linking it to a habit you never skip removes the need for extra willpower and means it survives on busy days. The existing action supplies structure. The speech, sound, and movement give your brain more points of reference to recall it later. You can also leverage environmental cues. Change your phone's lock screen to display the phrase you're working on. You pick it up countless times a day, so each glance becomes another gentle reinforcement. This works the same way advertising creates familiarity. Frequent, low-effort exposure builds recognition until the thought feels part of the background. Another tactic is setting a few subtle reminders through your day. Use a quiet alarm or notification, not to disrupt, but as a short prompt. When it appears, pause, think the phrase with intent, and imagine a real moment when believing it would matter. That tiny exercise keeps the pathway active without demanding large chunks of time. Layering in different sensory channels can make these repetitions more memorable. This isn't about proving lab-based effects, it's practical advice for giving your brain multiple hooks. Try speaking the phrase aloud sometimes so you hear it as well as think it. Write it by hand once or twice a day to involve both visual and physical movement. Walking while you say it ties it to motion, creating another context for recall. The more varied your cues, the less your brain will treat the thought as something it only encounters in one setting. Intensity isn't the goal. People often pour energy into one high-impact session and then leave the thought untouched for weeks. It feels big in the moment but fades fast without follow-up. Short, steady installations do better because they keep the network alive between uses. It's the same as language learning. Cramming has short-term benefit, but small, regular practice builds lasting fluency. Consistency also shapes what your brain sees as normal. At first, the thought feels odd simply because it's unfamiliar. Enough repetition takes away that edge. Once the brain treats it as obvious, it starts running it with less push from you. This is the shift you're aiming for, and it depends on getting through that awkward adoption phase. To speed that up, use moments when your emotions are already stirred in a useful way. If you've just finished something you were worried about and feel relief, run your new belief right then. Emotion acts as a tag in memory, so pairing your phrase with those spikes in feeling helps it stand out. Small wins work the same way. If your belief is, "I can manage challenges," repeat it after sending a firm but respectful reply to a tricky message, or fixing something you didn't know how to handle at first. Each of these moments gives your brain concrete evidence to store alongside the new line, building a catalogue of support. Over time, that catalogue outweighs the old proof for the outdated belief. To make progress visible, track it with the simplest format possible. Draw 2 columns in a notebook or notes app, date and 1 sentence. "I did X and it felt Y." That might be, "I spoke up in the meeting, felt nervous but prepared." This keeps the barrier low so you actually do it, and over weeks you'll have a record showing how often you've used the thought and how it's landing. Installing the thought is where impatience can lead you to stop too soon. After a few days, you might assume it's in there and drop the habit. But like any skill, if you don't practice, you lose fluency. Well-established patterns will reclaim space if they get more use than your replacement. The solution is to treat installation as routine maintenance. Say it while you pour your morning coffee. See it on your phone screen. Repeat it in the car. Write it in the corner of your notebook. It's fine if some days it feels mechanical. Even without a surge of feeling, each repetition keeps the circuit alive. In fact, mechanical can be a sign of progress. You're running it by default rather than needing to hype yourself up. Here's a quick 30-second installer you can try right now. Say your bridge thought aloud once. Picture one small, recent success that supports it. Hold that image for a breath in and a breath out. That's it. You've just reinforced the line with language, imagery, and physical sensation, and you can do it anywhere. Small, easy, and likely to be repeated. Over weeks, this investment turns the thought from something you call up on purpose into something that surfaces on its own. By keeping it in rotation daily, you create the conditions for it to appear in moments you didn't plan for. Once you've given your mind this stable, familiar starting point, you can push further. One of the most effective ways to loosen the grip of old patterns even more is to change the emotional tone around them. And there's a specific approach that can make that work easier without ignoring the seriousness of what you're tackling. Adding humor to heavy work. Humor can be one of the quickest ways to loosen the grip of a rigid thought, not because it trivializes what's important, but because it changes the climate inside your head long enough to make room for something different. When your mind is locked into a single interpretation, it's hard to see alternatives. Shift that state, even briefly, and a little flexibility comes back. That flexibility is exactly what you need when you're working to shift an ingrained belief. Many people default to a serious tone when they try to change old patterns. If the work is heavy, the mood must match, or so the thinking goes. But seriousness isn't always strength. Sometimes it traps you in the same emotional frame you're trying to escape. Bringing humor into the process isn't about making light of what you've been through. It's about creating conditions that allow change to land. It's like letting a bit of fresh air into a windowless room. Even a short burst of relief can alter your internal state enough for a new perspective to take hold. One simple, effective method is to exaggerate your inner critic until it tips over into absurdity. If the line is, "You're never going to get this right," picture it being delivered by the most over-the-top character you can imagine. A melodramatic stage villain clutching a cloak, or an exaggerated TV news bulletin complete with urgent sound effects. Stretch the tone until it becomes a caricature. That shift in delivery strips away the weight you usually give it, and makes room for you to see it as just a set of words, not an unquestionable truth. Changing the voice changes the way the thought feels. Often what makes it land so hard is the tone it arrives in: flat, certain, and absolute. Alter that tone and you create a little distance. In that moment of distance, you can choose to question it instead of being swept along by it. This is similar to what happens in satire. The core idea might still be there, but exaggeration changes how it's received. You can turn this into a regular habit with what I call a ridiculous reframe log. Each time a critical thought appears, jot it down, but don't record it straight. Rewrite it in the most overblown, theatrical way you can think of. You're bad at this might turn into, due to your catastrophic incompetence, you must now retire to a remote island guarded by suspiciously judgmental penguins. The aim isn't to make it sound cute. It's to highlight just how inflated and constructed these thoughts are when you really look at them. Keep at it, and you'll notice that the original phrasing loses some of its sting. When your brain has learned to laugh at the exaggerated version, it finds it harder to treat the plain one as gospel. You're not forcing yourself to believe the direct opposite yet. You're weakening the link between the words and the old flood of emotion that came with them. Humor works here because it interrupts the feedback loop between the thought and the feeling attached to it. Strong emotions, often shame or anxiety, are what make old patterns sticky. Laughter and amusement pull you in the opposite direction, even if only for a moment. That break is a wedge. Each interruption weakens the automatic connection between the thought and your state. It's important to stress again, this isn't about mocking what's difficult for you. It's about creating enough detachment to see you have options. You still take the underlying issues seriously, you're just playing with the package they arrive in. That deliberate mismatch, serious content, playful form, prevents your nervous system from defaulting straight into its most entrenched response. What you do with that gap is where change happens. Some people feel uncomfortable at first. They worry that if they treat a thought lightly, they won't treat themselves seriously. Or they think using humor means disrespecting their own experience. In reality, humor can hold truth as well as pain can. Its role here is to make the work easier to access, not to replace it. It's easy to apply this on the spot. When a familiar, heavy line shows up in your mind, note it down mentally. Give it the awards ceremony treatment later. In private, imagine it winning most overdramatic statement of the month, complete with staged applause and a mock acceptance speech. By flipping the tone, you take it out of its usual frame, ease tension in your body, and make it less convincing the next time it appears. Adding physical exaggeration adds another layer. If the inner voice says, "Well, that was stupid," try clutching imaginary pearls or pretending to faint like an actor in a silent film. Moving your body this way pairs the cognitive shift with a physical cue. That combination sticks in memory, and when the critical line tries to return, recalling the absurd movement can soften its impact immediately. Keeping a running collection of these rewrites lets you see patterns. Many critical thoughts are just slight variations on the same few themes. Recognizing that repetition makes it easier to target them at the source. And because your log is playful, looking back through it isn't an exercise in self-criticism. It's more like browsing a gallery of parody posters your own mind produced without knowing. With repetition, your mind starts anticipating the switch. You might notice a critical thought popping up and then immediately think, what's the most over-the-top way this could be said? That inbuilt pivot is the real win. It means the interception is becoming automatic, and from there you can drop into the serious reframe you've built for that belief. By the time you do, it's already weakened. Using humor in this way is less about entertainment and more about using a natural regulator to create breathing room in your thinking. It reduces tension, improves mental flexibility, and helps you approach problem thoughts as something you can interact with, not just receive. You're not erasing the reality of what you've been through. You're making space to deal with it on your terms. Want to see how doable this is? You can try it right now. Take a common self-criticism you hear in your head, maybe "I always mess things up." Now turn it into an exaggerated headline read by an over-serious news anchor. Breaking news: local person manages to destroy entire universe by slightly overcooking pasta. Say it out loud if you can. It only takes 30 seconds, but you'll feel the shift. The words are the same at core, yet they're harder to treat as unfiltered truth. Humor on its own doesn't rewrite the belief. That happens through the deliberate reframes and the daily installation you've already been practicing. But it opens the door for those other techniques to land without the wall of resistance that comes when you're tense, defensive, or fatigued. It makes the work easier to stick with, and the easier something is to stick with, the more likely it is to become a lasting change. And lasting change isn't just about what happens in your head when you're thinking about it. It's about what you do when life starts pulling your attention elsewhere. That's where the work either quietly fades or becomes something you live out automatically. Anchoring change in real life. Change becomes real when it moves off the page and into the moments you actually live. Anchoring change in real life means pairing new thoughts with concrete actions so they stop being theory and start being lived experience. Cognitive behavioral therapy often uses this principle through small behavioral experiments, testing a belief in the real world in manageable steps so the brain gets direct, observable proof that it can work differently. That proof is what makes the shift durable. Think about the difference between rehearsing a line in your head and trying it out in an actual conversation. One is an image, the other is an event your mind can store, recall, and attach meaning to. If your new belief is "my voice matters," simply repeating it in front of a mirror has value, but it won't register in the same way as speaking a single sentence in a meeting and seeing it land without negative consequences. That physical, in-context action becomes a memory your brain can reference the next time the moment comes around. The best starting point is usually the smallest one you can clearly link to the belief. People often trip themselves up by picking the biggest possible arena for proving change. If you're working on "I can handle challenges," you don't need to volunteer for the most complex project at work straight away. You can build strength faster by testing the belief in bite-sized pieces, troubleshooting a minor tech issue without asking for help, initiating a quick conversation with a colleague, or answering one difficult question without shutting down. The belief is then acted out often enough that it becomes familiar before you've risked more than you're ready for. Timing matters. The shorter the gap between rehearsing a belief and taking a matching action, the tighter the connection in your brain. If you've been practicing "I can handle challenges" in the morning, look for a low-stakes way to act on it before the day ends. Waiting days or weeks turns it into two unrelated experiences, which weakens the reinforcement. The language you use afterwards also counts. If your first move is to downplay the action, telling yourself that was nothing, or it doesn't count because it was easy, you undermine the proof you've just generated. A better approach is to name the link outright, even just to yourself. "I spoke up, and that matches the belief I'm building." This deliberate reinforcement teaches your brain that the action and the belief belong together. Tracking anchors helps you see the accumulation. This doesn't need to be a heavy journal practice. A single running list in your phone is enough. Keep it to one short line per entry. Spoke up once in meeting, sent back a clear reply, finished first draft. That way, when doubt appears, you've got a visible trail of evidence showing you've been acting on the belief regularly, even when it didn't feel natural. It's also worth integrating small, repeatable micro-anchors into your day so you're not dependent on waiting for a big opportunity. Here are 2 examples you can start with. Speak one sentence in a meeting, then note it in your phone before you move on. After any small win, say the installed thought aloud once and give yourself a tiny reward, maybe a sip of your favorite tea or 2 minutes to stand and stretch. Simple actions like these create quick feedback loops your brain can register without feeling like extra work. Celebration is not optional if you want the new pattern to stick. This doesn't mean posting updates for the world to see. It means giving yourself a small, positive spike that marks the action as important. Pause for a few seconds before moving on and recognize that you just acted in line with your goal. Pair it with a song, a physical gesture, or a short message to someone supportive. Over time, the association between acting on the belief and a positive sensation makes the behavior more likely to repeat. Holding out for the right moment is a common pitfall. If you wait for a perfect scenario to demonstrate a belief, you might go weeks without practice. Meanwhile, the old patterns keep getting reinforced. Anchoring thrives on quantity and frequency. Tiny confirmations delivered daily will strengthen the belief far more effectively than one big debut months later. These small actions also create a compounding effect. Repeated alignment between thought and action reduces the effort required to choose it next time. Eventually, the belief stops feeling like something you perform and starts feeling like something you simply do. That feedback loop between the mental and the behavioral layers is where the change becomes self-sustaining. For this to happen, make your anchors specific. A vague note like, "I participated more," is harder for your brain to store than "I answered the first question in today's team call." Specific details make the memory easier to recall and to connect directly to the belief. The more vivid the memory, the stronger the anchor. Personal relevance strengthens the anchor even more. Align the belief with actions that matter to you, even if they're small. Trying a new food might check the box for "I can handle change," but suggesting an improvement to a project you care about gives the memory both a practical and emotional hook. Emotional weight makes it easier for your brain to prioritize and hold onto the experience. You can also turn your usual environment to your advantage. The same spaces and people that sometimes trigger old patterns can become testing grounds for the new ones. If others are present when you act on a belief, their responses often add a layer of validation your internal critic can't easily dismiss. You're not seeking approval, but using live interactions as extra confirmation that your new approach holds up in shared spaces. Over time, anchored actions don't just shift how you see yourself, they reshape how people treat you. A colleague who hears you contribute consistently will seek your input more often. Friends or family who see you initiate plans may start inviting you to more. Those external responses feed back into your own perception, adding even more legitimacy to the belief. The strength of anchoring comes from its resistance to argument, even on a bad day. When the old line, "I have nothing to add," tries to surface, it's harder for your mind to cling to it if you can point to several recent instances where you did add something and it went fine. Those memories are stored events, not hypotheticals, and they carry more influence because they happened in your own life. At its core, anchoring change is about building a chain of undeniable moments. Every time you act on the belief, note it, and pair it with a clear acknowledgement, you add another link. The longer that chain grows, the harder it is for older patterns to override it. Practical, repeatable actions, especially the smallest ones, are the fastest way to make the belief part of what you do without thinking. And while this steady practice builds strength over time, there will still be days when the pressure spikes, your focus slips, or a setback pulls you toward an old loop. Those are the moments when you need a simple, portable reset you can apply in real life, without preparation, before the whole day tips in the wrong direction. The AAA Reset for difficult days. Some situations come at you so fast that your thoughts have already spun 3 steps ahead before you've even registered what's happening. That's where the AAA Reset for difficult days fits. A short, structured sequence you can run in real time to stop small setbacks from hijacking the rest of the day. It's built for those moments in the middle of the flow of work or life when you don't have space for in-depth reflection, but you do need to interrupt the slide into a fixed, bad day mindset. Picture it, you're behind on your to-do list, your phone keeps buzzing with new requests, and you've just spilled coffee on yourself. The event itself is unpleasant, but the real drain begins when your mind chains it to other frustrations, building a case for why the rest of the day is now doomed. AAA awareness, acceptance, articulation stops that chain from locking into place. It's not about erasing the problem or pretending you don't feel the way you do. It's about pausing long enough to separate the facts from the narrative and give your body and mind space to reset. Awareness is first. This is about catching what's happening in your mind and body before it runs unchecked. In reaction mode, all you see is the trigger event. You don't notice the interpretation you've layered on top of it. Spilling coffee is the event. Now I look incompetent is the meaning you've attached. Awareness is mentally stepping back to spot both. You name the thought and the feeling. I'm frustrated and embarrassed. I'm telling myself this will ruin the day. That act alone creates a split-second gap. Without naming it, you're just in it. With naming, you've got a handhold. In reality, this step can be done in seconds, standing in a lift, walking down a corridor, or even mid-call as you listen. You don't need a script in these first seconds, just basic labels for feeling and meaning. Your brain is more likely to calm when it sees them as separate rather than fused into a single truth. Acceptance comes next. This isn't approval. You're not saying "I like this" when you clearly don't. You're simply stopping the fight with reality. Often we add tension by telling ourselves we shouldn't feel as we do. I shouldn't be stressed about something this small. That extra layer is its own stressor. In the coffee example, your acceptance line might be, "I'm annoyed and distracted right now. I don't like it, but it's happened." There's no sugarcoating, but you're no longer wasting energy on resisting the obvious. This lets your nervous system begin to stand down instead of holding at peak alert. Then comes articulation, the point where you put your state into words, either aloud or quietly under your breath. "I'm stressed because I'm behind and the spill made me feel clumsy." The words aren't meant to be elegant, they're meant to be accurate. This engages the reasoning parts of the brain and interrupts the raw flood of the stress response. It's the same mechanism behind feeling lighter after explaining a problem to someone. The act of structuring it in language changes how it sits in your mind. Here's a tight, 3-line version you can copy exactly in the moment. Awareness, this is what I'm feeling. Acceptance, it's real and okay right now. Articulation, I'm worried about X. Each line is short enough to remember and say without breaking stride. In practice, the whole AAA sequence takes about 60 to 120 seconds, less than the time it takes to draft an email. You can try it right now. If you're able, pause this video or audio for 1 minute. Think of a small irritation from today. Run those 3 lines through once at a slow, steady pace. See what shifts even slightly in your body or your head. That small release is the point. You're lowering enough internal noise to regain choice over your next move. Let's put it into a workday example. You're late to a client call because the previous meeting overran. Awareness, I'm anxious because I don't want to look unreliable. Acceptance, I can't change that I'm late and I feel stressed about it. Articulation, I'm worried this will give a bad impression. All 3 steps can happen in under 2 minutes, and you go into the call without dragging your focus through a mire of self-criticism. Another case inching forward in rush hour traffic after a long day. Awareness, I'm tense and irritable because I just want to be home. Acceptance, I'm in this traffic whether I like it or not. Articulation, I'm frustrated by the delay and my shoulders are tight. As you voice it, you loosen your grip on the wheel or adjust your seat. The physical shift underscores the mental one, breaking the loop between thought and bodily tension. One of the strengths of AAA is how quickly it can stop a low-grade irritation from mutating into hours of background stress. By identifying the thought-feeling pair, accepting it, and stating it plainly, you reduce its hold before it gathers momentum. That makes it easier to decide your next step from a calmer place, instead of reacting out of the worst interpretation you've built. It's worth practicing AAA on mild annoyances, a mislaid pen, a noisy neighbor when the stakes are low. The more familiar the pattern becomes, the more readily you'll use it under pressure. When something heavier does hit, you won't be learning the steps on the spot. They'll already be second nature, shrinking recovery time from hours to minutes. Think of it as a circuit breaker. It won't remove the event that triggered you, but it will stop that event from controlling more time and headspace than it should. And because it's fast, portable, and entirely internal, you can deploy it anywhere, at the office, in your kitchen, on a train, even mid-conversation if needed. Over time, the benefits compound. You become quicker at spotting spirals early, better at accepting what's already here, and more skilled at reframing your state in words that reduce tension. That combination weakens the grip of unhelpful thoughts before they harden into your default for the day. It's important to be clear, AAA is a short reset, not a substitute for longer-term work on deep-seated beliefs or patterns. If you notice the same triggers or reactions dominating your days despite using it, or if anxiety or low mood is persistent and disruptive, consider getting professional support. A therapist can help unpack the underlying causes and give you tools that build on the quick resets to create lasting change. As you embed AAA into your day, you'll find it changes not just isolated moments but your overall baseline. Fewer days get written off. More situations get handled on your terms rather than your mood's. And as that gains momentum, you can start applying it alongside the other tools you've built, mapping old scripts, reframing from your adult perspective, practicing daily installation, to reshape not just singular reactions, but the whole tone of your inner dialogue. All of these methods point to the same truth. The thoughts that feel automatic are often just well-rehearsed scripts. They can be intercepted, adjusted, and over time, replaced. And the more you practice, the more you prove to yourself that those old lines aren't fixed, they're editable. Shifting the way you think isn't abstract, it's a skill you can practice. You've learned how to spot the unhelpful line, reframe it from your adult perspective, and strengthen it through daily use, with AAA on hand for the days that pull you off track. Make it real by running a 7-day experiment. Pick one recurring negative line and replace it each time it appears. Record every replacement. Then, leave a comment with that exact line and the bridge thought you'll use. It keeps you honest and helps others see they're not alone. These methods align with evidence-based approaches like CBT and current neuroscience, which show that repeated practice can shift ingrained mental habits over time. If this was useful, hit subscribe for more practical mental tools.